Good evening, everyone. My name is Genevieve Barlow, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's League of Women Voters Candidates Forum, featuring the candidates for District 1 on the Board of County Commissioners. Voting. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy, and I appreciate the time you're taking to listen tonight, either here on Zoom, via your phone, or via our media partner, KPTZ 91.9 FM, Port Townsend's community radio station. For those of you on the radio who would like to join us via the Zoom links, those can be found on the website for the League of Women Voters, Jefferson County. And for those of you on the Zoom link, if you start to have technical difficulties with Zoom, you can listen via KPTZ at 91.9 FM or via their website at kptz.org. For those of you interested in closed captioning, you'll see a button or box at the lower part of your Zoom screen with the letters CC on it, where you can click to see the captions Zoom generates live. Over the past months, we have received thoughtful questions from our community. So the questions you hear tonight are your questions, and we thank everyone who took the time to submit questions for this. The questions submitted were first checked against the job responsibilities to make sure we're asking questions that relate directly to the job. In many cases, people submitted similar questions, and we did our best to combine the questions in a way that allows us to cover as many questions as possible on a wide range of topics. We will try to get through as many questions as possible in the time we have together this evening. Before we began this forum, we made sure that all of the candidates were able to see our 2-minute timer, and now we'd like to put that to use. Before the forum started and in the presence of the candidates, I drew their names out of a glass to determine the order that they will speak in. Each candidate will be given a 2-minute opening statement. After that, we'll move on to questions at the question portion. And at the end of the forum, each candidate will be given a 2-minute closing statement. And because I drew your name out of the glass first, candidate Dudley-Nollette, you will go with your first opening statement.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Heather Dudley-Nollette. I'm a candidate for Jefferson County Commissioner to represent District 1 and, of course, to serve all across Jefferson County. And I'm especially honored to be with you today, with many thanks to the League of Women Voters. Thank you so much for putting this together, and certainly to the volunteers who are spending their time to help us get the word out tonight. So a little bit about me. I currently serve as the Deputy Executive Director of Bayside Housing and Services. My local roots go back 5 generations to one of our very first county commissioners, who was my great-great-great-grandfather, Lauren B. Hastings. In the early 2000s, I helped create the Young Professionals Network with what was then the Jefferson County Chamber of Commerce. I was the vice chair of Jefferson County's Economic Development Council, Team Jefferson, and I served on that board for 13 years. I co-founded a small business called the CoLab over 11 years ago in downtown Port Townsend, served as the president of the Port Townsend Main Street program, and was on their board for 6 years. And I worked in Ron Sims' Office of Management and Budget at King County, helping to manage a multi-million-dollar project. I was then hired to conduct new employee benefits and public disclosure trainings for all King County and Metro staff. And in those capacities, I have worked for county government directly as a staff member. I've spent the vast majority of my career collaborating with government staff and elected officials to accomplish many goals to serve our community. And maybe most importantly, I am the mother of 2 teenagers in our public schools, and it's probably my favorite job. So I just want to thank you, and I look forward to your questions tonight.
Thank you so much. And now we will hear from candidate Thomas.
Well, I second Heather's appreciation for League of Women Voters. That's very important. This is from my run for city council too, as a kind of the highlight of the campaign in my mind was the questions that came in and the ability to kind of have a really broad, good discussion, with your opponent, as it were, and in a way that people can check in later and listen and find it on YouTube, I think. And on the website. So I'm a local vineyard grower and winemaker. So kind of got blue collar roots coming into this, but I'm on the city council in Port Townsend, District 1. And, I bring a willingness to work with everybody to find common sense and outside the box solutions to our challenges. particularly focused on transportation, affordable housing, and lowering the bar for working people to thrive in Jefferson County. At this point, I know I can handle the complexity of the role, and I can roll with the punches and maintain a positive outlook. And I'm going to save us 1 minute and just stop it right there and answer
All right.
questions.
Well, thank you so much. So going forward, and we'll take into the questions who will be alternating first. So this is going to be for you, candidate Thomas. You've been campaigning now for several months. What have you learned about the county commissioner job during your campaign that you didn't know when you started campaigning?
Okay. Well, a lot. Well, it maybe to a degree, I'll highlight the distinctions between the city, my role at the city versus the role at the county. With the role as a commissioner is, the code and the law is already there from the state. I knew that before, but just kind of highlighting this distinction there. Whereas the city, we're affecting code on almost a weekly basis. We're working, the county, we're working with the existing code. And so you're kind of doing it a little bit more connection between many different facets rather than just the amount of committees that you're on, around 30 committees. I know that's, can give or take depending on the time drain of each committee, and your skill set and what you're willing to do. And if you're willing to travel to Olympia, you could be, you're really doing a lot of soft work around the different groups that are doing it. So it shows up very differently than the city role. And I've been learning that, and that's been very, very interesting. And of course, I've been learning a lot about the county outside of District 1, that I didn't know before, what the challenges in Brinnon or on the West End, that spent some time out there to kind of learn their issues, which is, I know it's not a lot of people out there, but they count, So yeah, it's a continuing learning. I'm curious to see what Heather says to this one.
All right, I'll turn the same question over to candidate Dudley-Nollette.
All right. So the job, for anyone who doesn't know, really, it does have a lot to do with implementing state law at the local level. So it's really important to keep up with the changes that need to be made and really analyze how those changes will affect this community and how they affect a rural community versus one that is maybe in a more urban place is really important to understand. So I'm really learning a whole lot about that. Another major component of the job is to set and manage the budget. And so I'm doing a lot of research and trying to understand what has gone into creating the budget that we have now, and what changes, where there is room and leverage to improve and implement new budget decisions as we go into this next 4 years, advocating at the state and federal level for the resources that we need here is critical in this role. And I think as much as our commissioners have been out there doing that, there is a lot of room for us to bring more resources to this community. It's something I do a lot in my work in housing, and I'm really excited to get into that. Something I learned new that I didn't know in the beginning is really the question that you asked. And I think the biggest thing that I'm really learning about right now from our current commissioners is about septage capacity and how important it is in districts 2 and 3 in particular. So I'm learning a lot about where our poop goes, and it's an incredibly important thing to understand, not just here but across the state. We're at a critical level.
Thank you both. This next question is going to start off with candidate Dudley-Nollette. The community stepped up to support Brinnon with the recent wildfire. What lessons do we as a county need to learn from this fire so that our vulnerable communities are better prepared for wildfires?
Oh, this is really important. This is, I will say thank you so much to all of the people who have been so deeply involved. Honestly, I don't think I'm surprised. I can't say that I'm surprised that this community has stepped up in the ways that it did. but and that it continues to do. The amounts of food and dollars and people's time that's the way that people have stepped up in this community is amazing. And that's something I think we can learn, that we actually do have each other's backs. And that is, I think it helps a whole lot. We were at the all-county picnic recently where we went through a scenario about emergencies circumstances, and it was really tough. It was tough to sit through that broadcast and to really envision what it would be like for this sort of community, for our community, if something large like that happens. But I would say that what happened and is happening right now in Brinnon is a great example of how this community will survive because it's going to step up to help each other. I know that our first responders have learned a lot from this incident, and I'm hoping that that we wouldn't want it to happen, but the fact that it's happened now is actually something that we can learn from if something larger happens.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I did, first of all, I highlighted what works, I mean, what has worked. And it really, there was such a quick response, at least from my vantage. But there was plenty of things that are like, wow, what do we do in a scenario like this that we hadn't dealt with before? So I'm part of the Jefferson County Fairgrounds, and we, immediately try to figure out, okay, how can we be part of this? So we're able to host animals in distress. It turned out nobody ended up needing it, but it was really important to, jump on the line and try to figure out how we can be part of that. But, not confuse the airwaves by communicating randomly. I think we learned that a little bit, some like Chimicum Valley Animal Rescue was the point or organization to coordinate any, animals, a lot of horses and stuff that needed homes. It's not an easy thing to do in a scramble. And it really highlighted that there are certain points of communication that really need to be followed before everybody just starts wildly making plans, because everybody wants to dive in. You see a lot of offers on Facebooks and a lot of people just kind of running out there to deliver food. At some point the food became, we don't need any more food, but we need money. That the flow of communication, I would be interested to have a little debrief and see if that flow actually worked well. I think it mostly did, but I could see a refinement on that. Yeah.
Thank you both. So we'll start with you, Candidate Thomas, for this question. We started the dry season with snowpack at less than 70% of its 20-year average. What steps should we as a county be taking regarding our entire watershed, and how do we educate the community, particularly newcomers, that water here isn't an infinite supply?
Well, I mean, it's maybe a different response depending on which area we're talking about. Of course, the city is getting the water from the two, the Big Quill, Little Quill rivers, the Lord's Lake, and the whole, the gravity water flow. And we're sharing it, with the mill, and that has a very specific, that's more dependent on the snowpack than the other areas, which are more, typically groundwater that people are accessing, which is a little more stable. It has its own ups and downs and fluctuations. But I do think the working long term with the mill as a partner, that's more of the city and the mill are working together on that. But I did call up the CEO and had a really good conversation about the long-term plans they have for the water usage, because they use literally 10 times what the city uses. But they have some great plans in order, and I really wanted to kind of hear from them, are they working towards, how would they handle a specific emergency this year, which we've already had, because we had the leak already, and we lost quite a bit of water, and we were down 4 days, drawing from our city lake here. But it was good to see that they do have a long-term plan there, which that will help us out. As far as the groundwater, that's a slower, like I said, it's a little less fluctuation, less of a specific fluctuation. That's going to, over time, we're going to need to be very resourceful about that. It is a limited resource at some point. We haven't hit that, but we will be looking at that down the line.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Dudley-Nollette.
You asked about how we would educate the community and particularly newcomers about this, and it's a really good question. At that all county picnic, one of the things that we did talk about was that it was that food storage is a major issue and something that we do need to look at, and certainly something that we're going to have to pay a whole lot more attention to. The same is true with water, and perhaps one of the things, when I was on the Economic Development Council, I got to connect a lot with the mill and hear about their plans for the future. And they have made major improvements around the way that they use water. But it may be a good time to go back to them now and really talk about how they're going to learn from this circumstance and what may be different now about their water plan, and perhaps about the agreements that we have in place about what their plans are for water. This may be a great time to really go back and revisit those things. But I'll just say, in terms of educating the community about water use, I heard loud and clear at the Owl County picnic that we all need to have our own personal supply of water. Humans can last a lot longer without food than we can without water. So we must have supplies for our family. The recommendations vary, but at least 3 days up to a week, if you can, of water for as many people as you have in your house. And you can check online for the recommendations about how much water per person per day. And I think we all can do better about that.
Thank you both. This first question is for you, Candidate Dudley-Nollette. Where do you see Jefferson County in 10 years regarding population? And what do we need to do now to prepare our physical infrastructure, meaning our roads, water, sewer, and electricity system, to prepare for this?
Well, did you say 20 years?
10 years.
10 years. Okay. So in 20 years, the Department of Commerce is estimating that we'll need approximately 4,000 new homes in Jefferson County just to manage the population that is predicted now. So I'm actually on a county data committee right now where we're trying to vet those numbers at a local level, not just take what the state has assessed for our local community, but really look at what we do have now, and what we predict based on what we know about our community. So we are vetting those numbers, and whether or not we need 4,000 homes in 20 years for a population that is predicted then may or may not be exactly right. But in 10 years, I believe our population is going to be significantly higher. And I don't think that we do ourselves any good by trying to do things to stop that population from happening. We just need to prepare. We need to prepare now. And infrastructure is an excellent place for the government to be engaged in that preparation process. So we do need to take some long, hard looks at our deferred maintenance. There's some significant deferred maintenance that we have all kinds of reasons why that deferred maintenance has taken place, but we need to look at what the highest priorities are and really start assessing where roads and all the other infrastructure needs need to be taken care of now. And we need to set that plan in motion today.
All right, thank you. Candidate Thomas?
Would you mind repeating just to make sure I get it right?
Not at all. Where do you see Jefferson County in 10 years regarding population, and what do we need to do now to prepare for our physical infrastructure, meaning our roads, water, sewer, and electricity system, to prepare for this?
Well, I'm the vice chair of the Growth Management Steering Committee, and we've just completed, our projections for the next 20 years and, more or less according to the numbers that Heather's citing there from the Department of Commerce. What was interesting going through that process is seeing where are the choke points. Obviously, the sewer system in Hadlock is a little bit of it's a great opportunity to get growth focused in an urban growth area, which is a positive. It's unknown, like how much. I'm really curious to see how well that'll work at density. Because if you're going to do all that infrastructure, you're putting a lot of money out there and a lot of work and a lot of focus and just capacity, like staff capacity, into creating that. You really want to get the density out of it. And I think you could start looking toward working. I would love to see the county working with the local villages into, if they want to get their own sewer. Brinnon has a system theoretically that was put there by Parks and potentially usable one day if they want it. Would it make sense in Quilcene? Would it make sense in Nordland? All these in Chimicum. It's hard to say. That's maybe the biggest bang. The biggest infrastructure piece that's hard to evolve towards. From septic. And I could see us doing better with shared septics and other creative uses. But yeah, the PUD is right there with us. But basically getting in and out is maybe going to be one of the biggest focuses we'll have. The ferry system is going to take another 5 to 10 years to get back up to speed, and the bridge is always a concern. Anyway, we'll talk more about transportation later, hopefully.
Thank you. So the first question is yours, Candidate Thomas. Many people perceive Port Townsend, with its larger tax base and the county seat, as the privileged town, while the rest of the towns in our county don't get the same support. Can you please speak to that perception and talk about the truth that's in it?
Well, I grew up in Jefferson County, in the county, so I can speak to a little bit of like that kind of. I mean, it was, of course, it was different back then, but there's still the same. There's kind of the same sense of there's an elitist and the regular people, whatever you want to call it, divide. And I do think that's gotten more extreme, and that's probably more truth to it now than there was back then, even. I know people in South County and on the West End in particular really feel disenfranchised by the decision-making process. Because even though and I think we have great District 3 and District 2 commissioners, they're still, mostly working in at least the main core of the main center of the county government is in District 1, far from everything else. It's a little strange to have the only county seat, the county seat being the only municipality that's on the edge of the county geographically. I do think that's kind of unfortunate. I do think over time, I would love to see more centralized decision making be moved towards at least Hadlock. I think there's that chance. One day if the courthouse is no longer serviceable as the main center for offices, I would hope that it move out of Port Townsend. To be honest, even though hey, District 1, I live here now and I love it. I do think that we could represent a little bit better, more centrally. And just something about being in the place that matters.
Thank you. Candidate Dudley-Nollette.
I do that sometimes too. This is such an important question. It's important not only because it's been an issue in our county since the dawn of time, probably, but also because it's reflective of the politics, if you will, that we're seeing all across the country and maybe across the world right now. We're finding it's really important more than ever that we find things to bring us together. We find ways to reach out to each other that are meaningful and that actually make people feel heard and equitable, and that the resources are being distributed equitably. And I can say, because I've been part of leadership in this community for 17, 18 years, that I know the intentions are often really great. For example, on the Economic Development Council that served all across the county, all 3 districts, we made efforts to bring people from districts 2 and 3 to the board and really tried to address issues. But I can see all kinds of ways that we did that and that fell flat. And they fell flat because we continued to hold our meetings in Port Townsend. And we didn't really get out there and truly advocate at that time for the true issues that were being called upon to address, like water flow down in Brinnon, for example, big issue. So I think we just have to keep working to truly get all the voices to the table. We have to go to the communities where the issues are and not expect them to come to us. And it has to happen now more than any other time in history.
Thank you. This next question is for you first, candidate Dudley-Nollette. What can you do as the District 1 Commissioner to do to foster a stronger sense of us as a whole county and a whole community rather than individual parts?
I suppose this is a continuation of the previous question, and I really appreciate it because it is, this is the time. Well, this is the time for us to really learn from, we can start to see where this country and where our communities will go if we continue down a wholly divided path. And I think we have to find all the little ways. And if we're going to come together on a larger scale, it's going to happen first, and it's going to be modeled in communities just like Jefferson County. We absolutely have the capacity here to do what Brinnon did and pull people from all across the county to step up for each other, no matter where you live, all across this county. Ben's right, we have something like 178 voters on the west end, but every one of those voters and every one of those citizens is equally as important as the ones who live in District 1. And we have to do meaningful things to actually make people feel that way. As I mentioned, I have a couple kids and they are in the Port Townsend schools, and the East Jefferson Rivals is a great example of this. The school districts have put our sports teams together in an historic rival circumstance, called themselves rivals, and celebrated it. And it is working. I tell you, the excitement around sports is up. The collaboration between the 2 school districts is up. And that's a great example of, in small ways, how we can really reach out to each other. And it takes listening. We really do have to go and actually sit down in the places, in the communities where the issues are happening, and listen for a long time before we come up with the right answers.
Thank you. Same question, candidate Thomas.
And I was distracted by the sunlight coming through the window.
It happens to the best of us. Here's the question again.
Yeah.
What can you do as the District 1 Commissioner to foster a stronger sense of us as a whole county and a whole community rather than individual parts?
Yeah. Yeah. And, well, then Heather answered the question well then, because that's what it sounded like she was answering. So I agree. The Rivals is kind of like the best model, I think, for that. Just kind of, I love how they leaned into that. Yeah, I do think, it's continuation of the last question, really, because getting out there and, physically being in the places while you're making your decision is the best thing to do. I mean, that's kind of what I've focused on a lot at the city council, is trying to get mobile meetings into the places, like the meeting at the pool buildings. I pushed for that, meeting at the golf course, meeting at, going tour the streets. We're going to do that next week. In person rather than sitting in a room, the same room we're used to sitting in. It is comfortable. It has the best acoustics, and the tech is all set up for the meeting, for Zoom and whatnot. But you've got to get out there. They do have the technology to do it. We've been doing that with those growth management steering committees. We've been moving those around, and that's all county infrastructure to do that. So getting there in person, getting the local people to be able to come out. You go down to the Brinnon Community Center, have people from Brinnon Community Center show up. It's hard for them to get up to Port Townsend, so let's do it there. I don't know, getting out to the West End would be tricky, but I think it's possible. Got to be at least once a year, that the commissioners could get out there together. And then when you're looking at all the road signs, the yard signs and stuff, going from District 1 into the Districts 2 and then especially in District 3, it's such a difference. And everything we can do to get past that divide is worth the effort. And I'm kind of here for it. I reach out to people all the time that I don't necessarily share views with, but that's so important to get beyond that.
Thank you. So next question is initially for candidate Thomas. It's a little bit longer. Intolerance is on the rise again in the county. A transgender employee of a local company was made to feel unsafe by their supervisor, and a school board member in Quilcene is seeking to ban books in the school library. What role do you think public servants play in setting the tone for a community, and how will you work with the other two commissioners to set this tone?
Well, I think one thing that our commissioners currently model really well is very open discussions on their meetings, their Monday morning meetings. They are very open with each other. It sounds kind of obvious and easy, but I do think that takes some cultivation for them to be genuine about it. And then with the ability for every topic to come up. And I think that first of all creates a positive place to be able to discuss issues that are a little beyond the normal scope of the role. As far as those are particularly tricky ones because there's private business and then a different government agency, the school district. So you do want to kind of mind your boundaries a little bit, but if we can. I'm going to a meeting related to the first topic after this, actually. So I am hoping that the commissioners are able to be there, like I said, go to these meetings. Individuals, it's hard to do it as more than one because you have the quorum effect there, and you don't want to turn something into a meeting that's not meant to be a meeting. So it's us reaching out individually, if you obviously within our districts, but then cross district as well, to sit with these people. I would reach out to that school board member in Quilcene as just say, I want to reach out. What's behind this? What else can we do to do this? Does this meet our values as a community? Not necessarily the book, whatever. I actually don't know the story, but the book, maybe a specific topic that they're worried about. I don't know, but is there a better way to deal with this as a community rather than, trying to take something out of the library? I'd have to know more about that one. I shouldn't always speak to that yet.
All right. Thank you. Candidate Dudley-Nollette, now to you.
Intolerance. It's a really, it's complex, and it can become really scary for people who are on the other side of that. I did a quick little bean poll at my booth at the Jefferson County Fair, and one of the issues, I asked people to identify what some of their primary issues were, and then there was a sixth jar that they could put their bean in and identify additional issues that were on the top of their mind. And trans healthcare came up at least 4 or 5 times, and all kinds of issues around equity, around intolerance, and the fear that it creates in our community was top on many people's minds, and it affects everything that we do. And I do think setting tone there is absolutely a role that our elected officials play to set tone right from the top of our country all the way down. And we've been living in a time when the tone is about divisiveness and it's about attacking each other, and it is time for that to stop. And again, this is the place where we can do that. Ben and I sat down at the very beginning of this campaign and we made a commitment to each other to campaign well and to campaign kindly and truthfully. And I think I'm happy to say we have committed to that and stuck with it. I would say that I would like to work with the county commissioners to create some reducing stigma training opportunities. Stigma can be trained, and how you address stigma is something that we can all learn how to do and how to do better.
Thank you. This next question is first for you, candidate Dudley-Nollette. Oh, I'm so sorry. In thinking about the business that comes before the county commissioners, what conflicts of interest do you see having? Do you own a company or invest in businesses that would create a conflict between best for the county and best for you?
Oh, this is such an important question. I, of course, am the Deputy Executive Director of Bayside Housing and Services, and people often ask me, and Bayside does receive some state dollars and some county dollars. So I just want everyone to know that I would unfortunately no longer be able to be in that position, and that's how I would address any conflict that could come from that. So I would no longer be part of Bayside, but I would certainly bring all the housing expertise that I've learned there and help to address housing issues at the county level. My family does own a business in a downtown Port Townsend, but I don't see any conflict of interest there. Any permitting that we would need to receive if we were able to move forward with any projects there would be through the city of Port Townsend, and so there would be no need to there would be no conflict or perception of conflict there. And I would just add that if there ever was something that came up that would potentially create a conflict, the tool of recusal is available to all of us. So I believe in transparency, absolute clarity around, and I think it's the responsibility of an elected official to be the one to say, hey, I think I have a conflict here. And to be honest and upfront, if there is any question of conflict, that should be the very first thing that that an elected official or a staff member, for that matter, should bring to the table. It should be addressed transparently, and if needed, one should recuse oneself from making any decisions that could be of benefit personally.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas, to you.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that sticks out, but besides the usual, you know, I own a home in Port Townsend. I just recently was able to purchase the house I grew up in from my mom in the county. So there's a little bit of you know, if you own something, you always have an obvious interest, you know, but there are ways around it, and there are pretty strict rules about that. So it's pretty clear, you know, if you're voting on anything that would impact your I'm not sure how strict they are in terms of like distance. We have in the city, it's more clear in terms of like 3 blocks from your house, you recuse yourself. I guess you know, I don't own a business. I don't have any other things that I can think of that would be an impact there. But yeah, transparency is kind of one of my top issues, and increasing transparency, you know, and kind of how we come up with, you know, I try to share, you know, open book into how I make decisions, you know, and in there you could kind of discover, I don't think in terms of like any sort of conflict of interest, but just think, I mean, I would take it further to the next level where you're really trying to say, I don't have a ideological hammer to wield on issues as well. I would take it to that point, you know, I really don't. I'm very fair-minded, and that's so important to me, and I know Heather's the same way.
Excellent. Our next question for candidate Thomas first is, builders have noted that it is exceptionally hard to build anything, let alone low-income housing in Jefferson County. What have you done or will you do to remove barriers to building while still protecting the fragile environment and ecosystem? Be specific on policies that you support, please.
Well, yeah, this is, an issue that a lot of us have had to deal with ourselves. And maybe this goes back to the conflict of interest. We're all living here, if we're trying to add an ADU or something like that, we've seen how difficult it is to kind of run the gauntlet there. It's easy to say I would cut red tape, but yes, I would cut red tape. I would make that a big priority. If in terms of specific plans that I would love to, in the first 180 days, put together a task force of local builders, but then also homeowner builders, to find out, like, people with recent experience dealing with the DCD and environmental health, and find out what their feedback was on all their projects that they try to do, various sizes. That's I think the best place to start. I'd love to get that out there and have that be very open, and get input from anybody from the public who has had experiences. Let's lean into that. Open the door to that. Don't hide from it. Don't try to, there's reasons for all the regulations, of course, but we need to hear it all. I do believe in being a little bit more open with development, but I also believe in emphasizing low impact development. There's a lot of ways to share infrastructure, not repeat infrastructure. The last thing we want are giant lawns and McMansions. I think that's a value we can say we generally share as a county, and I think it's important to lean into it. We want to maintain, as much of a canopy of trees as possible. Utilize. We don't want, if we can cut down on car usage, there's still ways to do that while still increasing. We get that in another question here, but there's more to say on that. Go ahead.
Okay. Candidate Dudley-Nollette.
Well, this is a topic near and dear to my heart, I have to say. I've spent many years permitting very large projects from a project owner standpoint, both in housing and in commercial projects. And I've worked in permitting at the county level, at the city level, the state level, and the federal level. And I have a ton of empathy for the staff that work on these projects. So I think really we have to look at the staffing levels, continue to look at the staffing levels and create efficiencies there. There's continuous process improvement tools that can be used and applied there. And I think I said in another forum that I got to sit in a continuous process improvement class with a cohort from the Department of Community Development County permitting staff. And I'm happy to say that I could see them really digging into this new concept of continuous process improvement. And I think they will really be open to creating improvements in their workflow. And sometimes it really is about workflow, and there are models that work. We can look to other counties that have models that are much more efficient than ours. And so that's something that I'd really like to make sure that our staff is supported to get out there and see the models that are working. Low impact development is incredibly important as well. I do support anything that we can do to have a lesser impact on our environment, and even to make improvements. The technology that is now being used in building is growing by leaps and bounds, and we really can bring some of that excellent environmentally sound technology here to Jefferson County.
Candidate Dudley-Nollette, what specific policies do you plan to enact to fix the underlying causes of homelessness?
Well, of course, this is something that I work in every single day, and but I will say that I really want to go in. I actually don't. I'm not thinking it right now in terms of all the things I want to go in and change. Right. I'm not thinking that I'm just going to go in and do this exponentially better job than our current commissioners. I think I have a lot to learn, and I'm excited to get in there and learn it. And I'm continuing to learn a whole lot on this campaign trail by getting out there and talking to our voters, and also talking to our staff and electeds. But really, when we're talking about addressing homelessness, we're talking about a very specific population. Somebody who is coming right out of the homeless condition is typically earning anywhere between 0 and 30 to maybe 50% of our area median income. That is a very little bit of money. So policies around homelessness need to address all kinds of things. Number one, we need to be the organizations that are addressing homelessness, they need to be funded for their operations, not just building new houses, but to actually support the case management and supportive services that need to be in place in order to make sure that an individual who has experienced homelessness can re-engage in the community and continue to be productive and add back to our community. I think there are a lot of things, that reduction of stigma, there's policy that needs to be put into place to help us engage people coming out of the homeless condition. And the other thing is, we will not address homelessness until we address the living wage crisis that we have in this state, in this county, in this country, and that's something that can be supported by policy.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas.
Yeah, this is not something that's going to go away on its own, is it? We're seeing an increase constantly. Obviously Heather sees it day to day with her role. And by the way, which I'm hoping I'll be able to let Heather stay in that role. Of course, that's my goal, because it's an important role she's playing. But I do think it's a spectrum issue. I do think that there are certain categories you could put people into, but there's a different reason why each individual is going to have their own story of how they got there. And sometimes it is, a medical emergency at some point, already living a little close to the line, and then you lose your house, you lose your, rental gets sold, family moves back, whatever, you're out a little bit. You think, well, I could, maybe be in this motorhome for a while. There's a story of how they slide down the slope here. And I kind of liken it to a game of chutes and ladders. There's a lot more chutes than ladders, though, to get out of it. It feels like it's the getting out of, once you get into either into a shelter, or you find yourself in somebody else's driveway in an RV, or there's not that many, unfortunately, not that many mid-level ways to get out of it. I do think that's just something I really want to explore as well, like how to find those steps up. Just one half a step up from where you're currently at can make all the difference. Once you get a little bit, if you're surrounded by the same thing that you're trying to escape, if you're trying to get out of, using drugs or whatever it is that's got you there, it's really hard to get out of it when you're in the middle of it. So I would love to see more integration into the broader spectrum, rather than packing people together that are in this situation. It's a big topic.
Mm-hmm. We're now moving on to our last question before closing statements. So for you, Candidate Thomas, please discuss 3 aspects of Jefferson County budget that you would like to see changed, and explain why you would advocate for these changes to the budget.
Well, I have to say, this whole campaign, I have wanted to dig in deep to all this stuff, and I have been swamped with my job and representing the city, the people in the city, and being a parent to a 5-year-old this summer, especially without school. That's been the first time I got to dealing with, oh wow, camps and all that stuff. So anyway, that's excuses, but I have not dug into the budget that deeply. To me, that's something I've been waiting to kind of dig into more in real time. So I don't have like a strong opinions there. Yeah, I mean, just in a really broad sense, I would say I'm always looking towards any kind of system. I'm very systems oriented, and anytime I'm presented with a system, you're always wanting to feed, like sharpen the saw as much as possible, while instead of cutting it, cutting with a dull saw over and over, just trying to work harder. So if you can get any types of you know, like with the city here, we've spent a lot, recently on the equipment to fix the roads. We've been dealing with this terrible pothole problem for years and years. I'm not saying this is the same situation in the county. I mean, I think find the county roads such a refreshing experience to drive after leaving the city. But um, getting the right equipment for the right to leverage the work is so important. And that's, it's kind of an obvious one, but sometimes we forget that. We just keep plugging away harder and harder and harder, and you forget, oh yeah, we need to step back and take a leap ahead financially. So I'll be looking for those opportunities to leverage future labor to get more out of it. And that's very general, but I hope I can have a more specific answer in the future when I dig deeper into that.
Thank you. Candidate Dudley-Nollette, to you.
This is certainly a big question, and it's one of the primary jobs of a Jefferson County Commissioner. I would say that looking for those efficiencies, like for example, as I was talking about the Department of Community Development and the permitting process, there are ways to analyze a system and find those points of efficiency. And I would love to really approach the budget in that way, to be really doing some kind of doing an analysis of where are we overusing resources. And there are ways that you can take those numbers apart and really start to look at where we're spending too much and where we're spending just a lot. And sometimes you look at that number and you realize, well, there's a reason that we are spending a lot there, and that's exactly where we want to put our money. So we're going to leave that there. Or sometimes you're even going to increase that level in a certain area. But basically, it's a process of assessing where the opportunities are. So I'd like to really start. I know that the county staff and electeds are starting to look at the budget now, and sitting in on those budget meetings will be really informative. So systems, looking where the city, the county, the port, the PUD can really collaborate and share resources there is incredibly important. I think we have the Intergovernmental Council, and they are finding some connections there and resources. But I'd also really like for us as a community to go through an exercise of what we really think the role of government is right now. And because I think it's changing, and I think there are some things that we can do to represent and reflect what the community wants in the budget.
Thank you. Thank you. So candidates, it is now time for your closing statements, which will be in the opposite order from our opening statements. So this means that candidate Thomas will go first.
All right, and I intend to keep this short again, but I would say the best skill I can bring to the role of commissioner is the ability to see things holistically and to look down the tracks and predict what the challenges are going to be before they happen. It's just something that I've had a knack for, and that's something that you don't always get in government. It's not how government typically operates, though you want it to. And I can work with a diverse inputs, diverse ideologies, diverse people, diverse kind of that's just kind of like a big picture thing for me to try to take the full spectrum of the community's input in, and I work with that in a holistic way to create positive win-win outcomes that pass the common sense sniff test. I think that's what I want to see in elected officials that I vote for, and that's what I feel like I can represent. I'm want to see Jefferson County thrive in its very specific way that we are different from other counties. We're not Clallam County. Not that different, but we are different, you know, and we're not Kitsap, we're not King County, and we're very unique. And we can be a thriving, like, I don't know, I want us to be a model for how a diverse political you know, ideologies can work together to create a positive sum, beautiful county to live in, you know, but not tell everybody else about it too much. So we don't want that too many people living here, but to make it work for those of us who are here.
Thank you. And finally, now to you, candidate Dudley-Nollette.
Well, thank you. Ben and I both care deeply about our community. There's no doubt about that. We both promise to listen to our constituents. Our values are really closely aligned, and that's been great to discover even more and more as we've been campaigning together. But what sets me apart is my years of experience and proven success in project management. I've worked in human resources, permitting, policy creation, budgeting, public-private partnerships. My 13 years on the Economic Development Council really opened my eyes to the diverse cultures and the concerns within the 3 districts of Jefferson County, not to mention what it taught me about local government's role in creating and maintaining infrastructure and jobs. I know our community really well, and I see our potential for a bright future. I have the skills and the work ethic that this job demands. I do my research, I ask good questions, I come prepared to participate and to nourish the goodwill that builds our capacity to solve problems together. My goal is to earn your trust and your vote. So I invite you to reach out via my website, which is Heather4Jefferson.com. There's lots of information there. And ways to reach out to me as well. So I just want to thank you all for your work, for bringing us together tonight, for cultivating these excellent questions from a really smart and engaged community. I am absolutely honored to live in this community with all of you. I walk downtown, I walk around District 2 where I work, I get to visit District 3, and I am just humbled every single day to live and work with all of you. I see the work that you're doing in our community. You're making the world a better place, and I want to get in there and make this a place where everyone thrives in Jefferson County. So thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. It was a pleasure to be able to moderate with both of you. So thank you for everyone to listening to this focused policy discussion tonight. And thank you, your candidates, for the thoughtful answers you provided. These candidates have taken the bold act of running, and now it's our turn to do the voting. If you are not yet registered to vote, we encourage you to go to votewa.gov, that's votewa.gov, and get yourself registered, either online or by mail through October 18th, or in person at your county courthouse until Election Day, November 5th. If you're not sure about your voter registration status, you can check it on the Vote Washington, votewa.gov website. If you want more information on the candidates, we encourage you to visit vote411.org to read the candidates' written responses to a variety of questions. Ballots will be mailed out by October 18th and can be mailed in or placed in one of the many drop boxes throughout the county. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. So please be sure to fill out your ballot and get it in either in a drop box or in the mail. I'm asking everyone to vote, and then talk to everyone you know about voting. Make sure that everyone you know has a plan on how they're going to get their ballot in. This forum has been recorded, and a link to it will be posted from the website for the League of Women Voters, Jefferson County, in the next few days. Once we have posted it, be sure to spread the word amongst your friends who are unable to join us live so that everyone can be an informed voter. It is now quite near 6:30 and time for our forum to end, and time for those of you listening on KPTZ 91.9 Port Townsend's community radio to return to your next scheduled program. Thank you all so much and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.